Barry Morphew and the mystery of Suzanne's disappearance. What really happened? On the outside, Barry Morphew and his wife, Suzanne, looked like they had the perfect life. They lived in a beautiful town called Salida, Colorado. They had 2 daughters, a nice house, and seemed happy to everyone who saw them. But behind closed doors, things were not as perfect as they seemed. Suzanne disappeared on Mother's Day in 2020. That day, Barry claimed he left early in the morning, before 5 a.m., for a work trip to Denver. He said Suzanne was still asleep when he left, and that she had planned to go biking, like she always did. But by that afternoon, things started to seem strange. Neighbors called Barry to say that his daughters were worried. They couldn't reach Suzanne. Barry called the police and rushed back home. The police found Suzanne's bike just a mile from their home, lying on a little embankment. Her helmet was found 8 miles away. Something wasn't right. Barry went on TV and made a public plea. He begged for whoever had Suzanne to let her go. He said he would do anything to get her back. He cried on camera. He told Suzanne that he loved her and their daughters needed her. But the police were already starting to question Barry's story.
Good evening, sir. Can I get your name and date of birth?
Barry Morphew, 10/17/67.
A husband is now charged with the murder for the 2nd time in connection to the death of his wife more than 5 years ago.
Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please do whatever it takes to bring you back.
Barry Morphew pleaded to the public for his wife to come home, but according to Colorado investigators, he's the one who killed his wife in a rage over a failing marriage and infidelity. And now prosecutors say they have a major piece of evidence that they didn't have the first time they charged him: her body. We're on the case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. It's been more than 3 years since charges were dismissed against Barry Morphew in the murder of his wife, Suzanne. The charges were dismissed the first time because a judge barred the prosecution from calling key witnesses after prosecutors failed to follow rules when it came to turning over evidence. These are AP images of Morphew in 2022 walking out of court, a big smile on his face as he has his 2 daughters by his side. They have continued to stand by his side. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Since that day, Morphew has been a free man until last week when he was arrested in Arizona and charged with the murder of his wife, Suzanne Morphew, who was reported missing on Mother's Day in 2020. Prosecutors in Colorado released the new 10-page grand jury indictment laying out their case now against Morphew. It includes shocking new details about how Suzanne's body was found and a key clue in her remains that prosecutors believe narrows their case down to one man, and that man is Barry Morphew. But before we get to these new developments, we have a lot to go through in what led up to where we are at this point, starting back on the day that Suzanne went missing, Mother's Day 2020. It was on that day that Suzanne, a mother of 2 girls, was reported missing in Salida, Colorado. It is a rural, picturesque town 2 hours and 30 minutes away from Denver. Police responded to the Morphew house, but no one was there. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, the door was locked, and Suzanne's car was in the garage. Later that day, police found Suzanne's bike less than a mile from her home, her helmet 0.8 miles away from her bike.
Maybe see if you can get that up to the road and then check the serial number or call the husband and see what kind of bike she has.
That's body cam video from local deputies who found Suzanne's bike. You hear them say, call the husband. The husband was Barry. He was the last one to see Suzanne alive. When deputies spoke to him, he said he was out of town.
What the police saw when police officers got to the house on Mother's Day, they noticed something strange. The door was locked. Nothing looked broken. And Suzanne's car was still in the garage. Everything looked neat and normal. The officers went out to look for Suzanne's bike. They found it in a small ditch. They thought it looked like it had been placed there on purpose. It didn't look like a crash. There was barely any damage to it. Not far from there, they found her helmet, but it was very far away. 8 miles. That made no sense. The officers asked Barry about the trail Suzanne usually biked on. He told them she liked to ride near the house and up into the hills. Barry said he had been gone all day and hadn't seen Suzanne since he left early that morning. He seemed nervous, but not emotional. The police found it strange that Barry didn't say goodbye to his wife that morning. He said she was sleeping and he didn't want to wake her.
In pictures, the Morphews looked like the perfect family. When police talked to Barry, he said that his marriage was, quote, the best, and that he and Suzanne had a wonderful weekend together. But investigators would soon learn that was not the case. Here's body cam video from the day that Suzanne went missing of a deputy speaking with neighbors who reported her missing.
Did Barry and Suzanne get along pretty well? You can answer honestly.
You know, I think they've had some problems.
Okay.
Yeah, in the past.
Like, just normal.
Normal husband and wife type deal.
Oh, they like talk about separating or anything
they
like
have,
that?
yeah.
Okay.
I would, yeah.
And you know this through
Macy. Yeah, I'm
Macy.
very close with her.
Yeah,
her
it's
daughter.
important that you
I know.
anything that
Yeah.
you know like that.
Yeah, and he is in Denver for a work job. He's a landscaper, and he's got a big job in Denver, so that's where he's at.
And here's body cam video of Barry arriving on scene later that night on May 10th.
Where is it? Where's the bike?
Oh, it's right there.
Where was it?
It was like just right down here in this little embankment right here. So I check this too. We got the husband on scene here with me.
Okay. I'm here with my daughter. She's at Barry's
Oh,
house.
okay. All right. Yeah, you can go down there.
Was it a crash?
I mean, the bike looked, the way it was laying, it kind of looked like it, but there's not really that much damage to the bike. That's the thing.
Lion?
Yeah, it was just like
Was
lying.
that no lion? Mountain
I didn't see anything that would
I didn't see anything, and they're not letting us go over the side
because we're getting a track
dogs. They're bringing dogs.
Where'd you find her bike? Right
just
here?
right down in here.
Do you know
Yeah.
where my husband and son are? They're
They
Yeah.
probably went down to Puma,
Yeah,
down to the
so-
We're in
house.
my house.
okay.
And Bear, just I know this is tough right now. Do you mind if I just get your driver's license for our record stuff? Search and rescue's on their way. Hey Barry, and then I'll probably need your help to kind of tell me some of the trails that she frequents, so we can backtrack some of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm sorry.
Oh man. And she's an avid mountain biker, right?
It's just started about 2 months. She's been hitting it.
And just a confirmation, you left this morning at 5.
She was sound asleep.
Okay. And she told you she was gonna go bike riding?
She bikes every day, yeah.
Okay.
She said she's gonna bike when she gets up.
So she was asleep in the bed when you left. Did you say bye to her or anything?
No, she's sound asleep.
Okay.
Always leave her.
So the last time you probably actually saw her was this morning. That was it, right?
Yeah, I've been in Denver. I got a big job up there. I've been there all day. Working.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, you need to calm down.
No, it's all good, man. We're doing the best. We got
Did
a
they
lot of
check
people
the house?
coming.
Did they,
Yeah,
they
we got,
look through the house?
yeah, they got the house. So what we're doing is we're keeping people out of the house because if the dog comes, they want to get a scent from out of the house.
Yeah.
So they don't want to pollute that scent. So that way we can start trying. And I walked up this. Like I said, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Nothing looked like.
I wonder if she was hurt, if she could climb up the hill.
But that's the thing. When we came here, still was daylight, right? So if she was right here, somebody would have easily, you know what I mean? Just because it was like literally like right down. It was this. I mean, if we saw it coming in, somebody would have definitely seen it too, you know?
He had to drive up to the Denver area on Mother's Day for a work trip. He told police that he left before 5 o'clock in the morning and Suzanne was still asleep. Barry said he was at a job site all day, so he didn't plan on talking to his wife, but he did get a call around 5 p.m. from neighbors who said that his daughters were concerned about Suzanne and that it was time to call the authorities. The neighbors noted that Suzanne's bike and helmet were gone.
But for someone to be so close to their wife, wouldn't they at least kiss her or say goodbye before leaving? That's when the police started asking more questions. The marriage wasn't so perfect when Barry talked to the police. He said his marriage with Suzanne was the best. He said they had a great weekend together and everything was fine. But investigators quickly found out that wasn't true. They spoke with neighbors who said Barry and Suzanne had problems before. Some even said they had talked about separating. Police found texts from Suzanne to Barry that didn't sound like a happy wife. In one message, Suzanne wrote, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years." That was a big red flag. It also turned out that Suzanne was having a secret affair with a man from another state. They used to know each other a long time ago, and they reconnected. Suzanne had been messaging him behind Barry's back. She had even told her friends that she was thinking of leaving Barry for good. Barry's work trip wasn't what it seemed. Barry told the police he left early for a landscaping job in Denver. He said he was gone the whole day working, but his coworker told a different story. The man who was supposed to go with Barry said they planned to leave together on the night of May 10, not early that morning. But Barry left alone and without any of the tools they needed for the job. Even stranger, when police looked at surveillance cameras near the hotel and businesses where Barry said he worked, they found that he was only at the job site for less than 30 minutes. Instead, Barry spent his day driving around and putting things in random trash bins. That's when investigators began to think Barry had made up his whole alibi. Strange phone activity investigators also looked into Barry's phone records. His phone had some very strange activity on the day before Suzanne went missing. On May 9th, Barry turned his phone off at around 2:47 p.m. and didn't turn it back on until 10:17 p.m. Then, on the morning of May 10th, Mother's Day, his phone was off again at 4:37 a.m., then back on at 5:37 a.m., right when he said he was heading to Denver. Why would someone turn their phone off during such important times? Investigators said it might be because Barry didn't want his phone to be tracked. When your phone is off, it doesn't leave a signal for where you are. That made it harder to know exactly where he was when Suzanne went missing. Barry's truck tells a story just like phones. Modern trucks also keep track of movements. Barry's truck told a story that didn't match his own words. He said he was sleeping in the early morning hours of May 10th, but the truck showed movement between 3:25 a.m. and 3:49 a.m. around the time Suzanne would have disappeared.
That I'm curious.
Yeah, I saw that. But they were bike shorts.
Yeah.
And, so I got them, she's bike and they're all sweaty, you know what I mean? Yeah, I noticed they did that.
You can hear Morphew being told not to touch Suzanne's bike. That's obviously a key piece of evidence. The new indictment reads that Suzanne was having a secret affair with an old acquaintance who lived away from Colorado. Investigators found on Barry's phone that he had deleted a text chain with his wife that included a screenshot that read a text message from Suzanne that said, quote, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." Investigators also found inconsistencies in Barry's account of his work trip to the Denver metro area. His employee said that they were planning to leave on that trip together on the evening of May 10th, not before 5 o'clock in the morning like Barry did. The employee also said that the two of them were planning to drive up together, but Barry just left on his own. Barry also, the employee said, didn't bring the tools that were needed for the job. When investigators looked at cameras at the hotel as well as businesses, they saw that Barry spent less than a half hour at his job site the entire time he was in the Denver area. Instead, he made trips, dropping off items in trash cans. When the police called about Suzanne being missing, Barry said that he was at the job site. And that just wasn't true. That's just the start of the evidence that prosecutors and investigators in 2020 and 2021 said they found to tie Barry to the alleged murder of his wife. Investigators say that Barry's cell phone showed some odd activity the day before Suzanne was reported missing on Mother's Day. For example, Barry appears to have turned his phone off on May 9th at 2:47 p.m. That's the day before his wife went missing. It then turns back on at 10:17 p.m. Investigators note, obviously when you turn your phone off, you can't track where someone is. Suzanne's electronics show her last activity to be around 2:11 p.m. Barry's phone then turns off around 4:37 in the morning the next day before it turns back on at 5:37 when he was headed toward Denver for his supposed work trip. Now, data from Barry's truck also provided some key clues and showed some odd activity. Like from 3:25 in the morning to 3:49 in the morning on May 10th, Barry said he was sleeping, but there was activity in the truck. Back in 2021, investigators also noted that Barry's phone showed it pinging around the house when it was on during the 2 p.m. hour on May 9th. Here's an image of what was presented as evidence back in 2021. Barry said that he was chasing a chipmunk around the house with a gun because it was a nuisance, and Suzanne was sunbathing. Then you have this, a needle cap that goes to a tranquilizer dart that authorities found in the dryer, which they believe came from a pocket in Barry's shorts. Even though investigators seemed suspicious of Barry from the very beginning, while his wife was considered missing, he was leading the charge publicly to find her.
Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you, we miss you, your girls need you. No questions asked. However much they want, I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you. I want you back so bad.
This was a video that was posted on a Facebook page on May 17th, a week after Suzanne was last seen. Later that month, investigators arrested Barry for Suzanne's murder. They believed that Barry had shot Suzanne with a tranquilizer gun, then chased her around the house until she became unconscious, then got rid of the body while creating a fake alibi for himself of going on that pre-planned work trip to Denver. Not to mention, one of the couple's daughters who lived at home was out of town on a pre-planned trip. But those charges didn't stick. In April 2022, the prosecution asked a judge to drop the charges against Morphew just before his murder trial was set to start. The judge excluded several expert witnesses for the prosecution. The judge had said prosecutors didn't turn over evidence to the defense that could help Barry's case. The DA at the time was disbarred for misconduct related to Barry's case. So Barry walked free, walked right out of the courthouse. His daughters were by his side, and the judge said that prosecutors could file charges at a later date. But Barry went public saying he was falsely accused, and he even went on Good Morning America alongside his daughters saying he was innocent.
I just love my girls, and I love my wife.
Barry and his daughters then filed a $15 million lawsuit against prosecutors saying that he was wrongly accused. But then comes September 22nd, 2023. Suzanne Morphew's remains were found. They were in a shallow grave a few hundred feet off of a road. Investigators say the majority of her bones were recovered, but they were significantly bleached. It's unclear what may have caused that. Experts tell me it could be because of the effects of the sun. Along with her bones, deputies found a cancer port, which is how patients receive medicine like an IV, as well as bike clothes that she was known to wear. But there's a new twist related to those bike clothes according to the new indictment that we read through, because it claims to show that the clothing lacked evidence of decomposition, which they believe means that she was not wearing those clothes at the time her body decomposed. And there was a lack of evidence suggesting that where she was found was the original grave site where she decomposed. Quote, the forensic anthropologist opined that based on these factors, it was unlikely Suzanne decomposed from a fresh body to a skeleton at this location. We've also learned new details from an autopsy that could be a damning piece of evidence for Barry Morphew's defense. The autopsy found the presence of a chemical mixture known as BAM. The indictment reads that BAM is often used as a sedative or tranquilizer for animals. Back in 2020, only one company in the US produced this chemical mixture, and someone could only get it if they had a prescription from a veterinarian. The Morphews moved to Colorado from Indiana in 2018. Back then, Barry was a deer farmer, according to the indictment, and he bought BAM in 2018 before moving to Colorado. Investigators looked to see who else in the surrounding counties had purchased BAM. Quote, records further showed that no other private citizens or private businesses in any of the surrounding counties had purchased BAM prescriptions from 2017 to 2020. Other than the local park services, Barry was the only one known to have the substance found in his wife's remains. In bold letters, prosecutors write, ultimately, the prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in that entire area of the state had access to BAM, Barry Morphew. Barry was arrested last week in Arizona. Here is his mugshot. And this is part of the brief court appearance he had before being sent to Colorado.
Good evening, sir. Can I get your name and date of birth?
Barry Morphew, 10/17/67.
Thank you, sir. And it does look like you are here today on a warrant from the state of Colorado, and they have indicated that they want to extradite you back to the state of Colorado. Did you get an opportunity to review that laminated card that was given to you today?
Yes.
Okay.
Barry waived his extradition. Even though authorities have laid out a new case against him, it appears that Barry is still proclaiming his innocence. His attorney is telling CBS Colorado, yet again, the government allows their predetermined conclusion to lead their search for evidence. Barry maintains his innocence, the case has not changed, and the outcome will not either.
Why would Barry's truck be moving if he was asleep? Even worse, Barry said that around 2 p.m. on May 9, he was chasing a chipmunk around the house with a gun. He said Suzanne was outside sunbathing. But phone records show Suzanne stopped using her phone around that same time, which made police wonder if something happened to her right then. A shocking clue in the laundry, investigators searched Barry's house and clothes. They found something very strange in the laundry, specifically in the dryer. Fernandez. It was a needle cap. This cap was from a tranquilizer dart, the kind you use to make animals fall asleep. That raised a lot of questions. Why would something like that be in the dryer? Barry used to be a deer farmer before they moved to Colorado. Back then, he had access to a tranquilizer called BAM. It's a strong chemical that's only made by one company in the U.S. You can't buy it unless a veterinarian writes a special prescription. Investigators looked around and found that Barry was the only private person in the area who had ever bought BAM between 2017 and 2020. That's important because when Suzanne's remains were found later, they tested her bones, and they found BAM in her system. A body is finally found for years. Barry wasn't charged with murder. In fact, in 2021, prosecutors arrested him, but the case was dropped in 2022 right before trial. Why? Because the judge said the prosecutors didn't share some evidence with Barry's lawyers in time. Also, at that point, they hadn't found Suzanne's body yet. Barry walked out of court with a big smile and his daughters next to him. He claimed he had been wrongly accused. He even went on Good Morning America with his daughters, saying he was innocent. They later sued the prosecutors for $15 million, but everything changed in September 2023. That's when Suzanne's body was finally found. She was buried in a shallow grave a few hundred feet off a road. Her bones were badly bleached, possibly from being in the sun. They also found her cancer report and some biking clothes, but the clothes didn't show signs of decomposition, which made scientists think Suzanne wasn't wearing them when she died. That suggested the scene had been staged. The chemical proof when investigators studied Suzanne's bones, they found traces of BAM, the same tranquilizer Barry had bought years earlier. That was a huge discovery. No one else in the area had access to that chemical. The only person who had a prescription for BAM was Barry. Prosecutors say this proves that Barry used the tranquilizer to knock Suzanne out before killing her. The indictment says Barry used a dart gun to shoot Suzanne with BAM, then chased her around the house until she passed out. After that, he likely hid her body and made it look like she had gone missing while biking. He even pretended to be heartbroken and led a search effort, all while knowing the truth. Barry is arrested again in September 2023. After finding the body and gathering new evidence, police arrested Barry Morphew again, this time in Arizona. He had moved there after his first case was dropped. Barry had a short court appearance and agreed to be sent back to Colorado. He's now being charged again for the murder of Suzanne. Even with all the evidence against him, Barry still says he's innocent. His lawyer told CBS News, Barry maintains his innocence. The case hasn't changed, and the outcome won't either. But this time, prosecutors have something they didn't have before. Suzanne's body, the chemical BAM in her remains, and new evidence that suggests Barry made up his alibi. To be continued, this is just the beginning of the renewed case against Barry Morphew. Boo. Investigators believe he carefully planned everything, including the timing. His daughter was out of town, and he had an excuse to leave the house.
Joining us now to talk about the new developments in this case is divorce and trial attorney Randy Kessler. There's a lot to unpack in this new indictment, Randy. I thought of you, though, in kind of who I was going to talk to in piecing this together, because this was a couple that it appears was on their way to divorce, and it just sparked, allegedly, everything that has once again landed Barry Morphew back behind bars. What do you make of, I guess let's start with the relationship part of it, that he told everybody that it had been, the best marriage, they were having a wonderful time, but clearly that's not what was going on.
Yeah, well, maybe marriage vows should now say until divorce or death do us part, right? Because that seems to be, we're covering a lot of these stories where you're on your way to divorce and then there's death. And either one of those ends a marriage, that's for sure. And you and I were talking before we started this interview about how motive really shouldn't matter. But you got to answer the question, why would this guy do this to his wife, his beautiful wife, the mother of his children? Well, according to him, marriage was great. According to her friends and that text and the back and forth, maybe marriage wasn't so great. Maybe she was having an affair, whatever was going on. So it always helps to answer the question, why? If I'm a human being on the jury, why am I going to find this guy guilty? Just because some A plus B equals C, I need to know why he did it. I'm just a human being. And that question's answered loud and clear now, it seems.
Right. You certainly have motive in this case. Back in 2022, he was charged with murder. The day before his trial, the prosecution asked for the charges to be dropped because there were some accusations of prosecutorial misconduct for not turning evidence over to the defense. For those of us who are not attorneys, what are the rules typically about what prosecutors need to make sure the defense has in preparation for a trial?
Well, look, in our society, it's like Winston Churchill once said, about democracy. It's the worst form of government, except for all the others. So our system, it's got its flaws, but it's pretty darn good. And one of the benefits of our system is we give the benefit of the doubt to the accused, right? You're innocent until proven guilty. And if the state has some evidence that might help the defense, or even if it's going to hurt the defense, they should at least know how to prepare for it. If they don't turn that information over, if they don't play fair, defense wins. That's just the way it goes. Sometimes guilty people go free because the state doesn't play by the rules, but you got to play by the rules to have a fair society, to have a just society. And that's a society we all want to live in. You'd rather have, at least me personally, I'd rather have 100 people going free than one innocent person spending their life in jail. It's just not what we want to do in a democratic, civilized society. The prosecution didn't play fair, but there's another component to it, Chris, which is at that time they had not found a body, right? It's a lot harder to dismiss a case when there's a body. When there's no body, you're never 100% sure that there was even a murder. So they had that component too. So all things being equal, the problems with the prosecution and the problems with the case, there not having been a body and a cause of death, I understand why it was dismissed back then.
Yeah, Barry Morphew, he's pleaded his innocence. His attorneys have said after his arrest last week that he's innocent of these charges. His daughters, after this was prior to their mom's remains being found, but they have stood by their dad's side. Just in your experience, when it comes to defendants, what should we take away from someone who, you read the indictment and it really appears like he had planned this out, according to prosecutors, allegedly, and he had this alibi all made up. It lined up perfectly when their daughter who lived at home was going to be out of town. He turned off his cell phone potentially to cover it. But then you have him looking into the camera saying that he's innocent, still saying that he's innocent. What should we take away from that?
Well, I think about a lot of the other cases in the past, right? John Benet Ramsey, people declare their innocence, but the facts are already out there. So they know what they're denying. They know how to adjust, whether they're guilty or innocent. They know what to confront. He declared his innocence and he was innocent. And then more facts came out. And all of a sudden, there were a lot of other facts that could have come out to help him, that she was found, next to the bicycle, or there was a gunshot from a gun that was, traced to somebody else. I mean, facts couldn't have been much worse for him than to say I'm innocent. And then all of a sudden there's some sort of, medicine or some sort of chemical in her body that only he had access to. There's some sort of phone records that, contradict his statement about how good his marriage was. I mean, all these contradictions coming up, boy, either it's a terrible, terrible, terrible bunch of coincidences, or he shouldn't have said anything and he should have just pled the fifth publicly and privately. It got a lot worse for him after he said he was innocent. But again, what would you do if you're innocent or guilty? You're going to say you're innocent, right? So do you read a lot into him saying he's innocent? You don't find someone innocent because they say they're innocent. You trace the facts.
And it just seemed like the story that he gave authorities, I mean, even just going to his marriage and saying that things were great, never better, and he tries to delete a text thread with a screenshot from his wife saying that they were pretty much going to get a divorce, like to believe that wouldn't come up. And then he's turning off his cell phone at times that seem very suspicious. And how common is it for people to actually understand what technology can do? Because we all know whatever you search online is going to be there, but it just seems like time and time again, you see some of these defendants that thought things through, but not enough. And authorities seem to have a lot of information about how technology works that the general public just doesn't seem to understand.
Yeah, it's pretty naive. I'm not a psychologist, but we hear the word narcissism a lot, or not aware. But if you think your wife's cheating and if you've texted her about it, you don't think that she told somebody that her marriage wasn't good. She might not have admitted her cheating, but she might have told people in case they catch her, my marriage isn't good. The fact that, forget technology, that there's not just human beings out there that observed that their marriage wasn't great. People see when a marriage is good and when a marriage isn't good. For him to go out on Good Morning America into the world and say, my marriage was great and things are great and I don't understand why this happened, without any belief that nobody's ever going to contradict that strains credibility. It tells me a lot about him. Again, don't know if he's innocent or guilty, but certainly if your marriage has problems, you own it. I had problems in my marriage, but I still love my wife. Or we had problems, we were working through them. Just assume it's going to come out. Otherwise, you're caught lying about one thing. And something we know in the law, Chris, you know this, is when you can catch somebody lying about one fact, then most states have laws that say if you catch them lying on one fact, you can assume they're lying on other facts. So when he denies that he did this, he's lying. He's probably not going to take the witness stand anyway. But, you catch him lying. And again, then he's lying to the public. He's lying to you and he's lying to me. He might have killed his wife. But what I'm even maybe more mad about is that he's looking in the camera and saying, I didn't do this. Now you're lying to everybody.
Well, and especially if he did this to have his two daughters with him on Good Morning America, sitting right beside him as he's, tearing up, saying, I love my wife, I miss my wife, as if, if he did this and he knows exactly what happened to her, but he's playing as if she's still missing. I mean, that's chilling in a lot of ways. If you are the defense attorney and you see this BAM tranquilizer, and in the indictment, they lay out that really there's only one person in the area of where her body was found, where they live near Salida, Colorado, that would have access to this one specific tranquilizer. On one hand, what a moment that must have been for investigators to kind of narrow it down and be like, oh, look at that. Barry Morphew is the only one who would have access to BAM at that time. If you're a defense attorney, how do you counter that if it makes it to trial?
I cannot imagine conceding that fact, because that is the fact. There's got to be somebody else that had access to it. There's got to be an alternate explanation. And my entire focus would be hiring forensic investigators, hiring people that understand that process and the biology and the chemicals, and getting somebody to be able to say, look, there are other people that could have had access to that chemical, or there are other reasons for why that chemical might have been in her body. You've got to fight that. You can't say he's the only one that had access to that chemical and that chemical is what killed her. I mean, that's A plus B equals C. It's a devastating moment for the defense. But again, unlike the first trial, at least now they know what's coming and they can prepare for it. I'd expect a strong defense that the state is wrong. There are other people that could have had that, and that's not what killed her. And here's my own expert witness to confirm everything that I'm defending my client about. They've got to have expert witnesses to offset this tremendously powerful evidence the state has.
How do you counter if the grand jury indictment comes down and then it's something that we talk about it in the media, it gets out there. If you're someone who's a juror in this small community in Colorado, in this county. You probably know the case pretty well. Even if you were to exclude somehow they're able to get this tranquilizer evidence excluded. How do you even push back from the fact that most people will probably know something about a tranquilizer, even if it's not that smoking gun that it appears the prosecution may have, if all of that's true?
Well, that's always been a problem with high-profile cases, and it's more and more of a problem with internet access and public access to records and to stories going on. But there are a lot of ways to deal with that, right? A change of venue. But believe it or not, juries are actually pretty darn good at following judges' instructions. When judges say you're to focus on the evidence you get today and during this week in trial, not on what you might have heard. Obviously, if someone is honest with jury selection and they say, I've already heard about this case, I already think he's guilty, they're off. They're kicked off for cause. So you try to weed out jurors that really don't know much about it, or say, I've heard about it, but I don't think this guy did it just because I heard that, or I'm not sure. You get an open-minded juror, and then you hope they follow the law, and you have really good judge instructions. You ask the judge to be very careful and say, if you've heard anything, number one, can you ignore it? And number two, will you ignore it? And hopefully you get jurors that have heard very little or nothing about it, or you change venue, you go to another county somewhere far away in the state. We had that here in Georgia, right? The hot car death where the guy left the baby in the car, and they moved it out of Cobb County, Georgia, and moved it all the way to the coast, 3 or 4 hours away, where jurors had not really heard about it. There are a lot of ways to deal with it, but you put your faith in the system, and at least it's 12 people, right? It's not a judge who probably knows all about it and knows the prosecution and maybe trusts the prosecutor because they see the prosecutor in their office all the time. You have 12 jurors who may be trying their very first trial.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case. I remember it. I used to live in Colorado back in 2020 when it happened, and then here we are 5 years later, Barry Morphew facing murder charges. Once again, Randy Kessler, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
He may have thought he could outsmart everyone, but slowly, the truth is coming out. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to this channel as we follow the legal battle, expert testimony, and the emotional journey of Suzanne's family.